Notre-Dame de Paris, book by Victor Hugo, Book 2, 1, out of Charybdis and Scylla. Night comes early in January. The streets were already in darkness when Grigori left the palace. He was pleased that the night had fallen. He was in a hurry to meet with some unlit and deserted alleyway where he could think things over at his ease, and where the philosopher could apply the first dressing to the poet's wound. Philosophy, as it happened, was his only refuge, for he had nowhere to spend the night, his theatrical venture having come so resoundingly to naught. He did not dare return to the lodgings he had been occupying in the Rue Grenier-sur-l'Eau, opposite the Portefeuille, for he had been relaying on what the provost was to give him for his epithalamium, to pay Maître Guillerme Dolcsire, farmer in Paris, for the cloven hoof tax, the 6 months' rent he owed him, to wit, 12 sous parisis, 12 times the value of everything he possessed in the world, including his horse, shirt, and bicoquette. He took shelter temporarily beneath the small wicker gate of the treasurer of the Sainte-Chapelle's prison, and, having thought for a moment about where to lay his head for the night, being free to choose any of the paving stones of Paris, he remembered having noticed the previous week in the Rue de la Savataire, by a door of a parliamentary councillor, a stepping stone for mounting mules, and, having told himself that should the occasion arise, this stone would make a mighty good pillow for a beggar or a poet, he thanked Providence for having sent him this good idea. But as he was preparing to cross the palace square to reach the tortuous labyrinth of the city with all those sinuous old sisters, the Rue de la Barillerie, the Rue de la Villa Draperie, the Rue de la Savataire, the Rue de la Gervais, and the rest still standing today with their 9-story houses, he saw the Pope's procession also emerging from the palace and charging across the courtyard with loud shouts, a great glare of torches, and Grigori's musicians. The sight reopened the wounds of his vanity. He fled. In his bitterness at his theatrical misadventure, anything which brought back the day's festivities soured him and drew blood from his wounds. He wanted to cross. By the Pont Saint-Michel, there were children running up and down with slow matches and rockets. "A plague on all fireworks," said Grigori, and fell back to the Pont au Change. 3 flags had been attached to the houses at the head of the bridge, depicting the king, the Dauphin, and Marguerite of Flanders, together with 6 smaller flags on which were portrayed the Duke of Austria, the Cardinal of Bourbon, Monsieur de Bijou, Madame Jeanne de France, Monsieur the Bastard of Bourbon, and heaven knows who else, all lit by torches. The crowd was admiring them. "Lucky Jehan Florbelot, the painter," said Grigori with a deep sigh, and he turned his back on the flags, large and small. There was a street in front of him. It looked so dark and abandoned that he hoped there he might escape all repercussions and radiations of the festivities. He plunged down into it. After a moment or two, his foot met an obstruction. He stumbled and fell. It was the bundle of beech twigs which the lawyer's clerks had laid that morning outside the door of a president of the Parliament to mark the day's solemnity. Grigori bore this new encounter heroically. He got to his feet and reached the edge of the water. After leaving the Tournelle Seville and the Tour Criminelle behind him, and walking along the unpaved strand past the high wall of the King's Gardens, where the mud was ankle-deep, he came to the western tip of the site and stood in contemplation for a while of a cow ferryman's little island, which has since vanished beneath the Bronze Horse and the Pont Neuf. In the gloom, the island appeared as a black mass on the far side of the narrow, whitish channel dividing him from it. In the beam, with small light, he could just pick out the sort of beehive-shaped hut where the ferryman took shelter at night. "Lucky ferryman," thought Grigori. "You don't dream of fame, and you don't ride up Ephilalbum. What do kings getting married or duchesses of Burgundy matter to you? The only marguerites you know are the ones the April meadows give to your cows to graze on. Whereas I, poet, have been barracked, and I'm shivering, and I owe 12 sous, and my soles are so transparent you could use them in your lantern as glass. Thank you, ferryman. Your hut is a sight for sore eyes. It makes me forget Paris. He was aroused from his almost lyrical ecstasy by a great double petard suddenly going off in the idyllic hut. It was the ferryman sharing the day's celebrations and loosing off a firework. The petard made Ringore's skin crawl. Damnable holiday, he cried. Are you going to follow me everywhere? Dear God, even at the ferryman's? Then he looked at the Seine, at his feet, and an awful temptation took hold of him. Oh, he said, I'd be only too happy to drown myself if the water wasn't so cold. Then he came to a desperate decision, which was, since he could not escape from the fool's pope, Jehan Forbleau's little flags, the bundles of beech twigs, the slow marches and the petards, to penetrate boldly to the very heart of the celebrations and go to the place to grieve. At least there I might perhaps get a brand from the bonfire to warm myself, he thought, and sup off the crumbs from the 3 great coats of arms in the king's sugar they must have erected on the public buffet. And that is the end of the first section.